All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Acquire and Operate. We are building a portfolio of super awesome micro SaaS companies that are profitable, and we're taking lots of care and love for the bootstrap community and helping them achieve interesting exits, generating returns for investors. And we're trying to do it on our own terms in kind of an indie way. It's kind of a riff on the intro there. Figured I'd keep it spicy. And we are back today with an operating concept. I'm hanging with Kay Lou. What's good in Brooklyn, my friend?
Well, it's nicer weather. I think we touched on that the last time, but as you can tell with seasonality, the allergies are starting to kick up. So we're still ripping, but things are starting to really transition over. And then with the time change, you're like, all right, let's get back to a normal schedule this weekend. So happy to take some personal R&R this weekend. I'll say that.
No doubt. And God bless spring. There are few elements where you just see humanity react to something. And it's just like yesterday we went and sat out and had some tacos and everybody was like, hey, hi, high five for you, high five for you. Hey, homeless guy, happy sunny day. It was just like, oh, everybody's a little cheery. So we'll take it, Q1 has been a hustle. So I think we're all ready for a little bit of recharge.
Yep.
So, all right, into the topic du jour. So it's an operating concept, as I noted, and we're going to be talking about creating and distributing content to build audiences. And, I think for the audience, like content distribution is one of the purest forms of operating leverage. And if we define operating leverage, it means 1 unit of energy in. Conventionally, or no operating leverage is 1 unit in, at best, kind of 1 unit back. So it's this 1-to-1 ratio. Anything that is better than a 1-to-1 ratio, where I put 1 unit of energy in and I get 2 units of energy back, or whatever the outcome is. Now we're starting to talk about this notion of leverage. And with content, you can think about it where you write content once, which is very hard, and then you slice it up and repurpose it and flavor it up for specific channels, and you distribute it. So it allows you to put 1 unit of energy into a thing and hypothetically distribute it across all these different channels and reach different audiences and get a bunch of units of energy back. So it's a high leverage activity, and it's about growing an audience ultimately. So I guess table of contents. So we're going to talk, and I wanted to back up because the last operating concept, we dove into the growth engine diagram that we're using to generate 20% year over year growth. And there were some very complex kind of topics embedded in that. So I wanted to back up and just keep it very simple. And so we're going to start with OG Gary V, which in his content around, and he was the one who started this. He's like, hey, if you're thinking about content, stop thinking and just document what you're doing, which has since become kind of coined as building in public, which obviously we're huge advocates of. And he also spearheaded a lot of the thought leadership around content pyramids. And you might be asking yourself, what the hell is that? We'll dive into it, but we want to start there. So Gary V, 2019, his agency is absolutely shredding. And it was kind of underpinned by this model, by this content pyramid, and by documenting what you're up to, et cetera. So we'll start there. And then when we move into the applications component, we'll look at some of the evolved distribution frameworks, which have really been spearheaded by the solopreneur and kind of creator economy movements. And those peeps are very fun to follow because they are just like on the most ruthless pursuit of operating leverage, because they're like, I'm trying to build a $5 million one-man business, right? And now everybody's talking about the $1 billion one-man business with generative AI and some other stuff. But anywho, that is the path we'll be taking. Anything to add before we dive in?
Yeah, I was gonna say on the piece with Gary Vee kind of being the forefather of the way that we execute content today. It's almost like you can see how that's influenced the algorithms and how it prioritizes those platforms that are putting out, or those accounts that are putting out pretty good content, but frequently at the same time. You click through those posts, you go to their site, you see there's that the more long-tailed keywords that's stored in long form content on their website, and then you subscribe, you start getting email newsletters that also have similar keywords and content, and you start to realize, hey, they're hitting me from all angles here. Their surface area is wide for partnerships, relationships, leads, you name it. I can't go anywhere without getting their content.
But I love the term surface area too, because I think a lot of people are like, well, and I guess I'm not here to convince humans to create content. Like, I think, it's just, there are a lot of people out there saying the same thing. So let's have a differentiated message. But I think
Yeah,
what's interesting is you have really nothing to lose. And so
yeah,
we just zoom back and get super meta. at worst, you basically are socializing what is your journal, right? And so and it's like that's going to force you to sit down, reflect, and as a function of documenting your thoughts, they become more clear, right? To communicate a thought, you have to have a certain grasp of it. So it's a useful exercise, period, just as a human being navigating the world. And so hopefully everybody's doing that. You have your beats on like weekly reflection, goal setting, all these different things that are kind of hallmarks of top performers. And you already did it. So tweet that shit.
Let me ask a question there to the audience who, heard that and they're excited to do it. How did you get over, let's say, the anxiety of executing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that was
The anxiety of people hearing your thoughts and saying, I don't know what this guy's saying. He's full of shit. Like,
yeah.
how did you get over that?
I mean, well, I think it's like, and there's some OG kind of mantras around this, but it's like if you don't define your brand, the market will do it for you. So you must take ownership of who you are and how you're represented, or the market's going to make assumptions, and you don't want to introduce that margin of risk. So I think that's the first thing is like, if you don't control your narrative, the world will. And secondly, it's just attracted so many good things. Well, I guess back to your point, I remember this was an old Dunlap-ism because he went hard too. He was in the Gary Vee camp, right? I remember back in the day, he was like, I'm basically going to spin up a media arm, which all these people basically have now. So you look at Alex
It's a
Hormozy, Cody
playbook.
Sanchez, they all have a media arm because they're like, yeah, no shit, content is super valuable. It's a distribution game. We need to kind of extract the thought leadership from everything that we possibly can and turn it into content. So it's like reality TV shows, right? Like they're just followed around, just pumping content, right?
That's the next.
His thing was like, I can always tell the posts that will have the most upside because you get that pit in your stomach before you hit ship. And so I've kind of followed that, where it's like the weirder you feel right before you rip it, the better. Because like you want to have a point of view.
So
and you don't
lean in.
Yeah, and you don't want to be controversial or contrarian just for its own sake. But I think when you start to be like, "Ooh, I wonder how the world's going to react to this," you're onto something. And there's a lot of stuff too, like escape. This is a not Navalism, but escape competition through authenticity. So, put another way, no one has a better chance of being you than you. And so you can differentiate yourself that way. So if you have a weird point of view, get it out there. And I can say that the upside, and we're talking about this kind of in two contexts. One is like a personal brand, which is you, and now we're seeing a huge shift, and I got to be careful of the rabbit holes here, but we're seeing a huge shift in sales, right? Where it's like, instead of an army of AEs, you need 2 or 3 thought leading, club banging, content pumping humans that the market goes to for thought leadership. And by the way, I'm steering the ship on this category and the pain points and how we're navigating these things and creating efficiency in this role or in this market. And we sell a SaaS that does this too, by the way. Right. So if you control the thought leadership and you're kind of spearheading, if you're progressing the sport, so to speak, the people will follow you, and you can attach all kinds of revenue streams to that. And so that dovetails into, there was this one VC, I can't remember what his name was. It was like Charlie O'Donnell or something. He was in Brooklyn. He's kind of puttered out since. And this was like maybe back when I was like hardcore in New York City. And he was like, you should build an audience first before you build a product. And we've seen a lot of our peer group where it's like, build the audience, right? Like, hey, what do you guys work and pick your niche? Maybe it's something that you play in, and start to create a dialogue, create collaboration, bring people together, lead with insight, be value added nonstop. And once you have that audience buzzing, it's kind of built in leverage, because then it's like, okay, I can take feedback and perspective from this audience to craft products. When my product is ready to light up, I've got distribution right there, and it's with a trusted audience. So I think as an operator, it's the same shit. Build in public, get the thought leadership out there, build an audience, and then it just solves for so many things. And back to your point, like, increase the surface area to be found, increase the surface area, to be engaging. And that has led to upside, with scaling ventures, talent, deals, blah, 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 blah. The upside, the list is absolutely extraordinary. So
yeah, I love how you just alluded to the early stages of scaling ventures with the community and the events you used to host in New York. That was the audience. Dude, you used to rip that.
That was throwback. I mean, it was basically like, how do you get smarter? I don't know. Go find the 4 smartest people on any topic and curate a lightweight agenda and have them talk. And then just capture the insight and socialize it to a relevant audience. Happy day.
Here we are.
And that, it was so funny how ahead of its time that was, when it all felt just so basic. I was like, let me guess, you're a CXO at a company and you were hired when there were 30 employees and now there are 500 and you have no idea what's going on. It turns out that there are 30 of you in New York.
Yep.
Like, have you gotten coffee with any of these people? Cool. And then by the way, we sell ADP. By the way, if you would buy some automated, some outsourced human resources and some payroll SaaS, that would
It's
be
beautiful.
Okay, cool. So I think the headline here is building an audience for yourself is one of the most high leverage activities ever. Building an audience for a SaaS company that you operate is one of the most high leverage activities ever. And the way to kind of get there is to invest a lot of energy into content. And we'll talk about that. But once you have that content created, you need to be thinking about, how do I squeeze the shit out of this lemon to just drip juice everywhere, drip juice everywhere. So let's dive into this concept of the content pyramid to start. And we had already touched on this notion of kind of documenting. So you don't really need to think about what you're doing, just document what you're doing, because usually that's very value added. So it's like, for us, it's like, hey, this SaaS thing solves these problems. Let's lean in and learn more about these problems. Here's the research we did. Here's the insight that we captured. That turns out that the root issue of these problems is this. Radical. The market's going to love that. You're going to clarify some things in their mind that they haven't been doing, et cetera. So let's dive in here a little bit to some visual support. All right, so content pyramid, and it's a little counterintuitive because it's flipped upside down, but just think that at the tippity top, and this slide kind of rendered a little weird, but God, I remember when I first read this back in 2019, I was absolutely blown away because he just codified the shit that was in my mind. And I was like, oh yeah, this is it. So at the top, so think that it's, for the listeners, it's a pyramid that's upside down. So the big beefy part is at the top. And there you have a long form piece of content. So think a Substack, a 2 or 3 paragraph essay, a video recording, something like that. And that's kind of the honeypot. Like, that's the thing that you draw from. And then you slice it up because there's probably a million little tidbits within that long form thing that are interesting. You purpose them for social media or whatever channels are relevant, and then you distribute it. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward when you say it like that. But a lot of people are like, oh my God, I need to do a Substack, and then I need to do tweets, and then I need to do LinkedIn. And it's like, no. Focus on the long form, and that stuff will just run downhill and light up all of your channels. The thing that I really appreciated Gary for was that he had a feedback loop embedded in his method. So it was like, document, right? Create that long form piece of pillar content. Obviously create it, like kind of fine tune it for whatever it is, distribute it, and then listen. God bless you, Gary B. Listen, right? Listen to the market. What content slapped? Because you can take those insights into account, iterate again, and then redistribute the same micro content across the relevant channels. And now you're kind of getting 2 full cycles of potential value creation within the same general work stream, all with the same real base unit level of work, which was creating that long form piece of content. That was a mouthful. Did any of that make sense?
No, it definitely made sense. I would say, said another way, look at what's performing best and reiterate, or repurpose that type of content.
Yeah.
That's really all it is.
Totally. And it's like, and you can kind of, recycle it. You got to be careful with how much you recycle, but you can also take a different point of view on the same topic. So it's like, ooh, this is interesting to the market. And then, if we get real Rick Rubin on it and we start to think about it as an artist, you don't want to pander too much to the audience. You want to rip what feels connected to you.
Authentic, yeah.
Like what's really authentic, but you do want to listen to the market a little bit, and it's about kind of building and kind of engaging that audience. So there needs to be that listen thing. I guess headlines are, performance is king. Look at what performs well and utilize that and react to it when you move forward. Simple as
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is the most basic thing, right? So then it's like, how to get started, right? So if you're a human, it's as easy as, on a weekly basis, I'm going to reflect on my week. What was I trying to do? What were the hurdles? What were the wins? What did I learn? Boom. Stand up a Loom recording, record it, host it on YouTube, share it on LinkedIn. Voila. And away you go. So
to add to that, I would say, or to give another example, one of the accounts that we follow on Instagram, I don't want to, make too many plugs, but Matt Gray, where he draws out his entire diagrams and just takes pictures of the journaling. That's another way to do it too. Some folks may be shy when it comes to cameras. It's okay. You can still journal and just scan what you have and put it online. As long as the content you feel is authentic, it moves the conversation forward, like we've been talking about. And you can come back, listen to see if it's performing well, and then just, repurpose that from a different angle.
And I think that's some very good advice embedded in that. Like, what you want to do is find the path of least resistance.
Yes.
So if it's like, I don't mind writing, great. Go hard at writing. Or I hate writing, cool. YouTube, Spotify, video, audio, or,
Freestyle.
but also like think about the market too, where it's like, man, people have told me that I'm a really good presenter. Good. Do video. People told me that they love reading my emails. Those must be some pretty outstanding emails, but it's like, cool, stick to writing and then just get going. Get started. Don't think, just
Yep.
get started. Start building muscle. Okay, so now we're going to change gears a little bit and talk about, more sophisticated distribution schemes. So as you had already, Matt Gray is we both love him. I love him. And to your point, God bless him. He's like, man, I was in Photoshop and screwing around in Canva and I hate that shit. So now I just write it on my journal with a pen and a piece of paper.
So honest.
And I take a picture and I ship it and it absolutely rips, right? So it's like perfect. But here, just to break this down, so you have content is the heart, you guessed it, right? The heart that's beating. And then he kind of distills that into, you could have a newsletter, threads, carousels, shorts, podcasts. And what's interesting is that we'll look at this is the same piece of content, right? So it's probably a newsletter that he turns into a tweet or a thread, that he turns into a Facebook that he turns into a LinkedIn or an Instagram carousel, that he turns into video shorts. And then all that was captured, at scale or in a larger format on a podcast. So just to give you a sense of the flavor. And then it's like, all right, I've got my audience growth. So I've got my playlist, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, newsletter. Again, the same content just being piped into those things. And then for him, he's a coach. So his monetization schemes are courses, digital courses, digital products that he sells online, which is content, community, weekly Q&A. And then he has an elite group that's kind of like a mastermind. So put another way, silver is the courses and platinum is the elite group. And obviously the pricing is going to reflect those monetization categories, but the audience is the flywheel. So he shares super interesting value added shit that all of us, gain from. Mm-hmm. Cool. You thought that was great. I've organized this into sequential learning system that's available on a e-course. Cool. Buy that. Great. You thought that was interesting. You can join a little, 10-person mastermind of your peers and meet with me on a weekly basis. So for the people that are like, yeah, dude, but I'm not a coach. Just imagine that there's a SaaS product right there.
Yeah.
Same shit. Like it's just a monetization scheme that is attached to an audience. And then you start to just realize that this is not a decision point. This is how business works. This is it. Like content is free to publish. Like at some stage, it might be like, hey, it's $1 to post on LinkedIn. That changes this a lot. But for now, you can publish your content for free to build an audience. And then once you've kind of engaged them and delivered an articulated value to the audience, you can monetize it with products and services. Full stop.
This is how business works. Said another way, this is how people consume their content, buy products, figure out what works for them and what doesn't, how they do their research. It's all about the content. And then to speak to the tech-enabled side of it, as we looked at content being the beating heart, I'll give you all an example. We talked about algorithms and expanding that surface area. As long as you use a distribution platform, the algorithms will work for you. Perfect example is, let's say I click on one or two of Matt Gray's posts. He is repurposing the similar content on threads. What happens now is next time I get back on Instagram, it's surfacing his post on threads and encouraging me to create a threads account and follow the same person. So there you have the surface area getting naturally expanded, and all you have to do is create long form content and use a distribution platform to do the rest of the work for you.
Totally. And I guess just for the audience, right? So, like for us, Substack is kind of the base, and I'm a writer, I guess, at my root. And then we use tools like Loomly to schedule. So we take the Substack, and obviously generative AI brings an insane amount of leverage to this, and generative AI is very good at reduction, which is take this big thing and make it smaller. It's not very good at take this small thing and make it bigger. Right. So expansion. So let's just, but it is still very solid, but it's like, that's like, a bot wrote this, but it's
better
like
with skeletons.
Like just reduce this thing into a thing and then I can fine tune it. So there's a lot of tooling available to help you kind of support the repurposing work stream. And then there's a lot of tech to schedule, because again, in terms of like productivity and performance best practices, you want to group your activities. So instead of being like, oh God, I have to go on Twitter every day at 3 p.m. and tweet, it's like, actually, I'm going to write all my tweets on Monday from 9 to 5, and I'm going to fill up a backlog for a month, and I'm going to schedule them all so I can get back to my day. And you're not context switching all the while. So there's tons of tooling. Loomly, Tweet Hunter is very legit. Taplio is very for Twitter. Obviously, Taplio is very legit for LinkedIn. So there's a whole universe of tooling, and just think that you have kind of content creation as one component, repurposing based on the platform is another kind of component, and then scheduling and distributing is another component. And there's tech and tooling all embedded around all that shit. Lastly, here's just an example. I mean, this is wild, but one Twitter thread, he turns into a LinkedIn carousel, an Instagram carousel, a podcast, a newsletter, and a YouTube. And so it's just like, there's so many ways to slice and dice one thread. So I guess we can probably end with that. Get writing content, build in public, build an audience, do it today. Just start writing random shit, get it out there. Like, you can't go wrong, right? It's like either you win or you learn. And if you get out there and people are like, you're an idiot, great. At least you've created a dialogue, and now you can expand your horizons, and maybe somebody can give you a point of view that enlightens you, right? Like, again, there's no downside except for sunk time, but I would argue that you need to be documenting your shit anyway to reinforce your learning.
That's it.
All right,
baby.
You know how we do. For the love of the game. K-Lou, always a pleasure, my guy. I'll see you next week. Oh, we got to get some lasers going. Let's see. Laser beams. Yeah. All right, buddy. Cheers.
Cheers.